Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet.
Hello, and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, the Sex Edition. I'm your host, John Johnson. And in this podcast, I'm going to talk about turning on your love light. Relationships go through ups and downs. And when the sex isn't happening, it is like crisis time. I want to help you get back into your groove. So in this particular example, I'm going to talk about a couple who hasn't had sex in about 6 months. And the concern is like, why the heck haven't we? How do you have that conversation with someone when you haven't been intimate in such a long time where, I mean, you can almost be in angry mode to try to get this thing out and discussed. I'm going to talk about a couple of strategies, one of which bring them to this podcast so that you both can be on the same page and you can be taking notes as you do this. Why? Because I want you to be able to ask your questions of each other, because clearly, if you haven't been communicating, and it's been this long, then we really need to be on a page where we are trying to understand the same things, and you need to get the same source. So that's going to be me. So listen to this podcast, both of you, and we're going to try to get to the bottom of it. Something that we always remember when you're talking about your sexual problems is you do not do them when you're trying to have sex. That's not a time to have this kind of conversation, because there's a lot of vulnerability surrounding this. And when we're vulnerable, we're also very capable of misunderstanding something that we hear, because people get defensive and scared, because you don't want to say something that's going to make you feel like you expose yourself to saying some wild, ridiculous idea. Maybe it could even be something that you've tried to deal with before and you just haven't had success at it. You keep trying to take a crack at it. But remember, this is very vulnerable stuff. That's why you don't have these conversations in the middle of having sex. You don't have them in the bedroom. You go out somewhere where you're going to have a nice, relaxing, peaceful evening where you can both feel less charged. And you need to start out a conversation like this with affirming the fact that you both are on the same side. Because when you feel like you're adversaries, or if your partner does not know that you care about them, you really love them, that you want to have an outcome, but you really need to get down to the brass tacks. Look, if your partner does not already understand that, then there's going to be apprehension, and getting to the truth is going to be that much harder. And what we want to be able to do is have a conversation and just let your partner speak freely, and just understand that that's their truth, that they're speaking it. Because if you think that they're not being open and honest with you, then it just sort of erodes the possibility of solving this, as opposed to having this thing drag on and on and on and on. And certainly when it gets to the point where you're not being physically intimate, then, for one person, it might not be such a big deal, because they might feel pressure to do this. And then on the other partner, they feel like they have a need that's not being met. And when you have such differing positions, it could definitely send the relationship into crisis mode. And for those of you that have been there, I can feel you nodding your head. Yeah, so let's get started. Get your notepad, get your pen or pencil out, and start writing down a few things. One, I want you to figure out, how long has it been since you have been intimate? Now, you both write this down absent of looking at the other person's page. And you're going to compare notes on a couple of these things in a little bit. How long has it been since you've been intimate? Okay, here's another question. How long has it been since you've had a real heart-to-heart conversation? How long has it been? I mean, you can pause this and then answer your questions. How long has it been since you've made your partner the focus of your attention? You see, these are the kinds of things that happen beforehand when you've had a good romantic relationship, when you've had good sex. All of these things seem to have been automatic. I mean, you were paying attention to each other, you were feeling each other out, and the love juices, the love vibe was flowing. And when the relationship or your partner does not feel like they are the focus, then a lot of these things wane, and it's hard to get into that sexy romantic mood just on the drop of a hat. So in comparing your notes, one, you may find that it could be hard for one of the partners to even, you might be in two totally different camps. One person could say, oh, it's been 3 months since we've had sex. And the other person could say, no, it's been 6 months. Now we need to really have a definition of what we're calling sex. We need to be on the same page so that you're able to read the other partner. You're able to sense what they're feeling. And understand there are no wrong answers here. We are putting down on paper so that we can compare notes, so that we can kind of get on the same page. Remember, it's not about who's right or who's wrong. It's about understanding what your partner is feeling. So what we're going to do is we're going to begin the discussion. Now, obviously, you're listening to the podcast. You're going to have to pause this, but you're going to have to begin the discussion about what your needs are. And it's not so much about why at this point. We know that having our partner and being sexual with them is we understand that part already. But just describe what your needs are. I mean, do you want to have intercourse once a week? And if you're the other person, I mean, do you want to feel special? You know, what does it take to get you in that sexy romantic mood? And what took you out of it? Is it that you don't feel love from your partner? Is there a jealous streak going on? I mean, is it a medical issue? Because if it's something medical, and, for women, it's painful, and that's not going to make someone feel sexy or feel romantic, because if it's painful, you're going to avoid it. I mean, you'd probably rather smash your thumb with a hammer. Okay. That's not what we're looking to do. It's not supposed to be that. Then if that's what you're experiencing, then you have to show some resolve about wanting to resolve that. That sounds like a double. Want to resolve it, because understand that if it's painful for you, your partner can have compassion for that. Nobody's going to want to do that. But what are you doing about solving the problem? That's something that's very important, because your partner wants to know or needs to know that you're trying to resolve the problem, that you're not just leaving whatever their needs are just hanging, because you are part of that. You have to be working towards solving the problem. If there's an obstacle to you getting to the doctor's appointment or making time for it, then you need to share that with your partner so that you can get to the doctor, so that you can work on this, whether it's a medical doctor or whether it's a psychologist or something. Make this a priority, and tell your partner that you're making this a priority. Why? Because that helps them feel that you want to resolve it too. Because if it's just one person wanting to make love and the other person doesn't, that's a very vulnerable place for the person that is having desire to have to deal with, because they feel like they're out there on their own, that you're just going to call them a horn dog or whatever, and you're not going to want to do something about it. Remember, your partner loves you, so resolving this is important. Now, I gave an example of it hurting, so the illustration there probably assumes that it's the woman that is having some vaginal dryness or whatever's happening. Now, men suffer from lack of desire also. And for that part, I'm going to take a little break. I'm going to come back and I'm going to cover some of those things so that men in and of themselves, if you're having an issue with your sexuality, that it's something that you need to be willing to bring to the table and discuss what your needs are and what you are needing to do to resolve it. And you're not going to have all the ideas. You may need to do some research. You may need to talk to your doctor, medical doctor, psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever it is, so that we can get to the root of the problem. And again, share with your partner that you are trying to resolve it, because that's going to go a long way to putting you both on the same page. Okay, stay tuned, and I'm going to come back.
Always on the go, but the day just won't be one without your Hollywood fix. Let Golden State Media Concepts Entertainment Podcast take care of that. Jordan and Keith is Entertainment Tonight meets Access Hollywood.
I'm Jordan. The guy laughing, that's Keith.
Yeah, I'm Keith.
An all-inclusive look of pop culture.
Hello, and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, the Sex Edition. I'm talking about turning on your love light. Now, when it comes to men and women, I want you to hear this and understand it. Don't criticize it, just understand it. Because remember, I got both of you here listening to this podcast. Men suffer from performance anxiety. I want you to ask him right now, has he ever suffered from performance anxiety? And if he's being honest, he will tell you that he has. It may not have been with you, but men suffer from performance anxiety. And it could be because there was maybe at a time that they were inexperienced at being sexual, or they may have wondered if their penis was big enough, because guys have wondered about that forever and ever. There's so many stories about from one culture to the next and how big it is, and you know, they're the guys who lift weights are big and strong. And, you know, you hear stories about guys taking steroids. They have all these big muscles, but they have a small member. And, you know, there's all kinds of wild stuff out there. And, you know, I'm not saying men go out there and start checking each other out in the gym, but, you know, we are so affected by the visual. And some of that visual includes what they see. What do they see? Pornography. And I'm not knocking that. What I'm knocking is the fact that that is theater. And I've talked about that many times. And when you start comparing yourselves to, and I'm talking to men, when you start comparing yourselves to guys who, by the nature of the fact that they're performers and they are selecting, you know, it's like selecting Olympic athletes. You know, they get the biggest and the best. And the whole idea is to be able to sell movies. So they get these people who are ginormous, and then you as a guy are trying to compare yourself to that or that performance. Okay, that's a distortion. Now, it's there for entertainment, and you keep it in its scope. But when men have in their minds that they have to perform like the guy in the movie, then they start talking themselves out of who they really are, and then they try to be a performer. And sometimes obviously they're going to be terrible at it. So guys, I'm going to tell you, stop looking at porn, trying to figure out if you're as good as the guy in the show, because what you really should be focused on is what you and your partner want. Your partner. There are times when it's good for having ideas and maybe to get the libido going, or you know, loosening things up, because we might be a little bit inhibited. And that's what I mean when I say get it going, loosening things up. You know, sometimes our inhibitions and we don't know how to ask for things, but you know, you have something sexy going on. It sort of changes the mood, and that's between you and your partner. But think about it. As I said, ladies, ask your male partner, when was the last time he had performance anxiety? And it could be an ongoing thing in terms of the performance anxiety, because we get distracted. Guys, we get distracted in the idea of what we think our partner, our woman wants. And sometimes, and this is the problem with men, oftentimes don't ask anything. They're expected to know. In their heads, they're expected to know how to do everything. And with that, there's a lot of pressure in this situation. So therein lies the opportunity to have failures. Because when you think you're supposed to know something and you don't know it, how are you gonna judge that? And I'm talking to the guy. You can't. Learn how to communicate with your partner. Learn how to ask, because I'm sure women have some idea of what they like. Even if it's just to say, hey, go a little slower. When guys learn how to be in communication with the partner, learn how to read their partner, because a lot of times men are taking the lead. And then there are those opportunities where, if you want to take some pressure off yourself, hey, let your partner take some initiative. Let your partner be in charge for a while. Be open to sharing that kind of thing. See, that helps make it sexy because then it's a partnership, and that's the way it should be. I mean, it could be kind of exhausting to have to come up with all the ideas, but I don't doubt that if your partner is going to be there with you, that they have some idea what they like. I mean, if you've been partners for any length of time, and it's also an opportunity to experiment with some things. There's plenty of books. And as I was talking earlier, if you've watched a porn movie together, there's some ideas. I mean, you can at least borrow the idea, borrow the intensity, borrow the sexy atmosphere. Maybe it's about wearing costumes or have dinner and just not wearing anything. You can just sit there at the dinner table and not wear a thing. Just stare at each other and just go for it. But, that sort of mixes it up. Hey, have dinner in bed. That way, but make it about you. Just come up with fun stuff. Again, I hope you're writing this down. But for men and the performance anxiety, given the opportunity to share that very fact that you've had it, because I know sometimes we don't really want to tell the truth. Why? Because I guess we think it's unmanly to expose ourselves that way. Well, guys, get over that. Really, get over it. And I hope that when you do share that, I mean, if your partner gives a chuckle, that's not a laugh at you. That might be because that's like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And, some people have what we call inappropriate responses, and that may make us want to shrink down. So ladies, please don't laugh at your guy because he says he thinks his member is too small. Okay. Even if you think it is, you don't ever tell him that because that makes a guy feel worse. That is the ultimate cut on a guy. So don't tell him his member is too small, and you'll spare him the embarrassment. And if he has an issue with getting it up, then maybe it's time to see the doctor. And you know what? Here's something that affects that: alcohol. So if you're trying to have sex after you've been drinking, understand that drinking in and of itself, for some people, it lowers their inhibitions, but it doesn't necessarily make them better sexual performers. Because when you get enough alcohol in your system, your parts don't work. They don't work like you expect them to. Now, there have been studies, and they've talked about marijuana and its effect on sexuality. Some people have a great experience, and I think that's part of the mental aspect of it because it's lowering the inhibitions. It makes people feel a little more relaxed and they can take in the experience. But I'm not saying it's going to make you a better sexual partner in terms of your ability to get it up. So there's some discussion out there on this very subject, but that I'm talking about is more of a philosophical argument, and I will revise that over time. Something to consider. And ladies, I'm going to tell you this. There is not a time to discuss your ex relationships and how great they were in bed. That is another one of those things that causes men to have performance anxiety. And I know men oftentimes want to ask you about your partners, about your ex lovers and how good they were, because that is one of those insecurities that men have because they want to feel like they're the best. That's just part of that, what men do. So you got to be very careful, guys, about asking that kind of question because, you better be careful because if something like that is going to make you feel uncomfortable, because guys always want to know that they are the best. And if you're going to give that communication about how good the guy, okay, we'll let it fly. But don't give the communication about that your present lover isn't as good as somebody in your past, because where do you think that's going to go? That's not going to go well. Again, performance anxiety. Men have it all the time. They don't necessarily discuss it as such, but when it comes to the point where they're not having sex with you, then you definitely want to get to the bottom of that. And guys, remember, be honest. Really think about it yourselves. You've got this partner who is available to you and you don't want to make love to your partner. Okay? So that having been the case, we have some notes that we've written on our notepads, and you can either swap notepads and let your partner read what you've read, read what you've written, or you can just read it back to them. Think about what your anxiety is about, why, Share, be open and honest. Remember, this is the opportunity to do that. This is the perfect time. Number two, we don't do it in the bedroom because that's not the time to be having this conversation. We have this conversation after we've, say, gone out somewhere and it's been a really easy evening. We've had, takeout, something, so that we're not stressed over this, because this whole conversation can be anxiety producing. Because I know it's going to be front loaded. We might worry about, okay, what's going to come out of this conversation? Let's decide right now that what we want to have come out of this conversation is a better relationship. This is not about getting ammunition to try to sabotage anything that's going on, because that doesn't work. That only creates more mistrust. I'm going to take a break and I'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello, and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, the Sex Edition, turning on your love light. In the very beginning, I was talking about if you have a relationship and you're not being intimate, how to get to the root of that problem so that you can get started being intimate again. And in the middle segment, I've talked something about men and performance anxiety. It's just one of those things that happens, and when it does, it deserves some attention so that you can resolve it and get back to love making. And I hope to help women understand something about men's performance anxiety and some do's and don'ts around that whole subject. So I'm going to wrap up this last segment talking about some more things and turning on your love light, and literally turning on your love light. Go and get, we can kind of create this little signal here. So when you're thinking about, sometimes, we say it and sometimes we put on sexy costumes. I think you should take one of those lamps in the bedroom that's sitting on the nightstand and put a different colored light bulb in that lamp. And when you turn that one on, that means, hey, we're wanting some amorous things happening, want some love making. So that could be one of the little tricks. Or put a certain magnet on the refrigerator, some sort of little signal that works between the two. It's sort of a private thing. And it could be a certain color of underwear that's the signal. See, that little private thing that people make when they are a couple, it's like looking across the room and knowing what they mean. Another thing that happens is we can have code words. Whatever it is that you and your partner decide. See, all of these are things that can help turn on your love light. And when you make it interesting, make it fun, make it playful, then you just kind of slide into the groove. And guys, I've said this many times, when it comes to women, one of the things that I hear over and over again is it takes women a while to get warmed up. And when you can do that for them as an act of love, then they appreciate it, and foreplay starts early. And it doesn't have to be the foreplay where you're touching and it's physical or sexual. It could be a note. It could be a text message. And, be careful about those things when you're sending text messages or notes on company equipment. Make sure it's your own stuff, because, if it goes out there into the world, it can be captured, and, we want to keep it private. So that's just a caveat. Be sure you keep it to yourselves. You don't want these things getting out there and for the wrong eyes to see it. Create an atmosphere of love with your partner. And one of the things that you can do is, and this is sexy, take a shower or a bath with your partner. Get in the shower, soap each other up, lather each other up, and just have some intimate time together. You don't have to have sex. Just be there together. See, that's good. That's two people. They're together. You're spending time. It's all about the two of you. That's what turning on your love light is. Don't forget to do these things. Write them down. Bring your partner to the podcast and let them listen to this. I want you to visualize what you want to do with your partner. Share that. And then have that wonderful encounter. See, this is something you can do. You can get up in the morning. You can write your love notes. You can think about having a shower together or after you come home from work and keep the love juices flowing. You put some candles out, get them lit. You can have your costumes laid out. You can go out and have dinner. You can come back. See, have all of this happening during the day. And here's something that they actually teach in other cultures. When it comes to sexuality, you can do this sort of scene, let it play out over several different days. So it doesn't have to lead to intercourse the first day. You can sort of plan things and let this stuff build with anticipation. And you can do a lot of caressing. You can do the shared massage sort of thing and get up, have your normal day. You can send love notes and things back and forth. And then you can do the dinner thing. Finish that out. Again, no intercourse. Go the next day. And as this sort of progresses and sort of builds, then the lovemaking, the intercourse, that part of it, because what you learn over time is you learn to explore your partner's body. You learn their likes and their dislikes. And if you haven't had that experience, it's a perfect opportunity for you to explore in that way. And there's a certain amount of sensuality around this whole experience that really makes doing it and being able to do it. Because some people understand sex happens only when there's intercourse. And oftentimes that's the way men are wired. They're programmed to think that way. So it does take a bit of work to unprogram it to be in that particular way of thinking. So men, hear what I'm saying. It doesn't mean that you can't have intercourse. What it is suggesting is that there's other ways to what that account for lovemaking that's not always about penetration. And when you learn that about your partner, especially when it comes to caressing and pleasing your women, and some women like to snuggle because for some women, sex in and of itself seems to be a means to an end. And for them, the closeness and the love and everything ends when a man has an orgasm. And if men don't understand that, then they don't understand the frustration that women experience when it comes to lovemaking. So guys, I'm saying this to you. That's oftentimes why women want to snuggle and be close in that way, because when it comes to men and how they react to it, that men oftentimes when they have intercourse, that when they finish, then they roll over and they're done. And that's how men have wired themselves to behave a lot of times. But if you understand that that's what a woman does not want, she doesn't want you to just roll over and not be touched and not be approachable. She wants to caress. Once she trusts that you're not going to reject, because, think about this. When you roll over and turn your back, what does that signal? It signals rejection. And that's hard. When it's hard to understand that aspect, because it's like an international thing. When somebody turns their back on you, what do you say? Rejection. You shut down. No, don't touch me. Don't be around me. You see? So guys, that's the emotional response. And I mean, you can't just tell a woman that, no, don't think that way. That's not how it's supposed to work. You have to understand this, and to be able to do better at being a lover, when you understand things like this, then you behave differently. When you've had an orgasm and you feel and you're in your refractory period, then you snuggle with your partner, you hold them, and that leads to more and better intimacy. And you know what? The payoff is, it's not just about being loved when you're in the bed. You get love and nurturing throughout the relationship, whether it's the special favors that your partner will do for you because you're behaving in a real attentive way. That's very tender. And that builds very satisfying lovemaking. We're talking about turning on your love light. I'm John Johnson. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, the Sex Edition, and I want to thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast.